Welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. Here we nourish the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. If you'd like to find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Thanks for joining us. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. So I was recently asked by Gregory B. Sadler and also Harold Kavli from Modern Stoicism to put together a piece to go on their Stoicism Today blog, and this was an absolute honor. This is the first time that I've done anything like this for Modern Stoicism, and it was great to have the invite, and I really think that you guys will enjoy the piece that I wrote. It's called Epistle to the Stoics, A Call to Arms. And so I'm going to include a link in the show notes to where you can go and read that. I hope that you do. And I guess I just want to thank again Gregory and also Harold for the invite. And in Walled Garden news, I just want to let you know that we have some pretty exciting meetups coming up in this month, right? We had Professor Scott Aiken last week for a discussion on the Stoic God and imitating the divine. And thank you for everybody who showed up to that one. And it was really a beautiful conversation. We ended up talking for about an hour and 45 minutes, and we had a great Q&A session. So that was a real honor to have Scott back with us there. And that episode will be released later on. Although, if you would like to view that whole episode, you can get it in the Walled Garden by becoming a patron. But anyway, head over to thewalledgarden.com/events, and upcoming this month, we have this coming Sunday, we have our Soul Searching with Seneca meetup where we're focusing on his letter on the friendship of kindred minds. Then the following week on the 15th, we have a live interview and Q&A with Dr. David Feidler, who just wrote the book Breakfast with Seneca, and it's blowing up all around the world, right? So we can't wait to pick his brain about Seneca and his life, and really looking forward to that conversation. So as I said, that's on the 15th. And then on the 19th, we have a conversation with Sharon LaBelle, live meetup there, where she's going to be talking about Stoic tonics for clarity, ease, and serenity. And if you've never been to a meetup where Sharon has shared a lesson, you have to come along to this one. She shared a lesson last month with us on how this moment can change everything. And it was such a beautiful, powerful learning experience for everybody there. And I'm sure that this month is going to be absolutely no different. And on that note, if you want to get the full recording of last month's meetup with Sharon LaBelle, you can actually, as I said earlier, you can become a patron on the Walled Garden, and you can actually get that full recording there. Now, there's only two more meetups that I want to mention, so bear with me. The next one is going to be the 25th, and that's a conversation between Kai Whiting and Jonathan Church on Stoicism and free speech. So that's going to be really exciting. We are going to be opening that up to questions, comments as well, so we want this to be a lively conversation, a lively debate. It's going to be very interesting. And then finally, on the 27th of February, we have our next Soul Searching with Seneca meetup, which is focusing on his letter on the value of retirement. So that's all of the meetups. As I said, you can head over to thewalledgarden.com/events, and there you can register for any of them. They are completely free. You don't have to be a patron on the Walled Garden to come along to those, although we do highly recommend it, and we appreciate any support that you're willing to give. So with all that said, I want to move on and introduce our guest for today. So I recently was interviewed on Brandon Tumblin's podcast, The Strong Stoic. I'm sure that many of you will know of that podcast. He does great work over there, and I didn't really know him until Kai introduced us both, and then I went on the show and just fell in love with his approach to philosophy and his interview style and his thirst for knowledge, his thirst for wisdom. And I was honored to be on that show and to have that conversation. And by the end, I thought, gosh, we have to get Brandon on our show as well, because he's clearly aligned with our values and what we're seeking here at the Walled Garden. So let me just give you a little bit of information about Brandon, and then we will dive into the conversation. So Brandon, he is, as I said, most well known for his podcast, the Strong Stoic Podcast, where he discusses philosophical ideas both solo and with guests. However, he does much more than just podcasting. He also coaches individuals to help them to be their best selves, writes articles, plays music, manages projects, and several other things. Brandon is always in search of new opportunities that have the potential of making the world a better place. So with all of that said, I just want to restate how much I really love Brandon's approach, and he is a true philosophical seeker in my eyes. So here we go. Without any further ado, I present to you my conversation with Brandon Tumblin of the Strong Stoic podcast. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Listen, I'm so excited. I'm excited to talk to you again, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, look, I really enjoyed our last conversation on your show. I found you to be very insightful, a great interviewer, great conversationalist, and so this is kind of our round two. And I'm going to just throw it out there first and say, okay, talk to people who don't know you about your podcast and what you're doing over there.
Sure. So I guess you could say I'm a philosopher of sorts, and I like to use the of sorts because I think calling yourself a philosopher is questionable, let's say, but philosopher of sorts. And basically I host a podcast called the Strong Stoic podcast. Basically it's based around Stoicism, but it's not like a formal Stoic course. I think of it more as like an aspiring Stoic trying to figure out the modern world. And so, as I'm sure you know, and my listeners will know, the style is more like dealing with day-to-day stuff and going through, modern music or modern fiction, movies, whatever it is, to sort of bring home a lot of what tend to be fundamentally Stoic ideas. And so it's, there's lots of formal education out there on Stoicism, and it's just not my style. I do more sort of exploratory, which I enjoy. And I know, and I also have guests on as well. So I do solo episodes where I talk about all kinds of things, whatever's on my mind at the particular time. And I also have guest episodes, which of course, that was our first conversation, which was quite amazing, might I say. I really enjoyed that, and it was well received by my audience. So yeah, I mean, I guess basically through conversation, I try and, brush on Stoic principles, but not just Stoicism. We talked in our last conversation, we talked about art, we talked about, music and chaos and order, Taoism, like Christianity. I don't like to stay limited to one thing. That's sort of a big part of my life right now. It's the whole podcast thing. And I'm excited to see where it's going in the coming years. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I do.
Yeah, man. I love it. And I really want to encourage everybody who's listening to go over there and check it out, the Strong Stoic podcast. And I'm going to pick you up on something that you said there, a philosopher of sorts. I've thought about this as well, philosophy being philo, love, Sophia, wisdom, the love of wisdom. So, when we're practicing philosophy, of course, we are seeking after wisdom. We supposedly love wisdom and want more of it. What do you think it is that tips a person over to being a philosopher? Because to me, it seems like it cannot simply be a mark at the front of your name, doctor of philosophy, something like that. It cannot simply be a university degree, because you could make the argument that many people who have doctorates in philosophy are not necessarily practicing philosophy as philosophers, right? So what do you think it is that makes a philosopher? When's the moment going to be when you tip over and say, yep, that's me?
That's a great question, man. I don't know, to be honest. I think when I think of philosophers, I think of who most people think of. I think of Socrates, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Nietzsche, and what makes these philosophers in my mind, like you can imagine, I'm sure you'd agree with me, there's no hesitation in my mind to call these people philosophers. It's not like, well, kind of a philosopher. It's like, no, they were philosophers. Why? Because they've stood the test of time, because they've contributed to their field in such a way, such a profound way and significant way. And, of course, there's the whole Stoic idea of everything being impermanent, right? Everything's going to fall apart. Like even, I'm sure eventually, maybe even Marcus Aurelius will be forgotten about. But it still seems to be that we look back on these people that have contributed significantly to and not necessarily like expounded on the Stoic philosophy as per se, but at least had a significant impact in its implementation. And I think that's what's really interesting to me about, you say, hopefully someday maybe I can transition into being an actual philosopher. And I suppose what excites me as a human being more than anything is that at every point in time of time in history, we get the chance to sort of contribute to that. Right. And I know you're feeling that. And I have a lot of respect for you and appreciation for the work you do, because it's kind of like, the Dead Poet Society, where I don't know if you remember this scene. I brought this up in another episode of my own podcast, but there's a scene in the Dead Poet Society where the guy's telling them about passion and music and life and beautiful things, philosophy. Right. And he says, we're all going to die someday. We're all mortal, but it's such a beautiful thing that we can actually come into life and contribute a verse. And so that's kind of what I see it as being as. It's, you can philosophize, you can think and all this stuff, but I think having a positive impact on the world, and it doesn't have to be the world, it can be your community, it can be something, but I think it's something that it's a title, I think, that has to be earned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry about that weird sound that just came out of my mouth right then.
It happens, man.
Clearly, I'm still overcoming puberty. Okay. So it sounds so it's a title that has to be. It sounds very similar to an answer that I gave when somebody asked me, "Do you consider yourself a Stoic?" And I was kind of like, "Well, we'll see in the end." When I've lived my life and I'm dead, perhaps they'll call me a Stoic and perhaps not. So that's interesting, because we certainly seem to be in the camp of practicing philosophy, of, seeking deeper wisdom. And not only that, it's sharing it with people in the hopes that it will benefit their lives. And I guess what's the adventure that you really want to go on when you're doing your podcast or throughout your life? What do you think it is that you're really after, as an overarching, and I don't know if there is one, but throw the question.
It's funny. I know we spoke about this. I don't think we spoke about it in recording. I think this was a personal conversation we had, but we spoke about how, in some ways you stumble through things, right? And, I certainly have a long-term plan with the podcast. And I think, I have some long-term goals with that, but I think fundamentally, it's a huge learning experience for me. Like it's a journey that I'm going on, and I would like people to come along with me on that. And I think people are hopping on board, and it's deeply rewarding to have anything remotely similar to that. Like even a drop of someone talking to you and sharing their journey with you and willing to struggle with you and suffer with you, like that. It's so rewarding. And so part of it is that, it's like this, it's what would you say? It's a combination of self-discovery but also contributing to the world at the same time. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think that's a good recipe. And the third piece, which is really important. So, because basically what I said is, okay, I'm doing it for myself in many ways, but I also want to do it for other people. I want people to take value in it and share along that journey. But the third part is that it needs to be aligned with reality. Meaning through the podcast, I'm also seeking truth. And I think, I had Jeremy Sherman on, a doctor there, and he said, you go towards truth and you go away from truth at your peril. And so that's something that it's a very profound thing to say. And I've been thinking about what that actually means, because it's very complicated, but certainly through the podcast, it's pushing forward towards truth and doing it in a way that's beneficial to me and my journey, but also whoever wants to come along with me.
Yeah, that's interesting. It certainly seems to me to be correct that it is the case that we do move towards or away, towards truth. We move away from truth at our peril. Did you say, sorry, was the quote, you move towards it and away from it at your own peril?
Yeah. So let me give,
Okay,
so
that makes
basically
more sense to me. Go on.
yeah, well, I made the point to him, because I was at this point in my time in my life, I was very like truth, like let's go towards truth, man, let's go. And he was really good at challenging you, right? Like he challenged me so much in that podcast episode, and really, like absolutely loved the conversation. But he
Mm,
challenged me. He said, "Well, yes, you want to move towards truth because living in deception is dangerous, but truth is also dangerous."
yeah,
And to me it was like, oh god, you're, because I knew he was right, like he's
yeah,
right, like because truth is painful. Now
yeah.
falsehood is extremely painful, but like, could you handle the ultimate truth? Could you handle truth? That's something I've been thinking about. And Nietzsche said this, what the best a man is he who can handle the most truth, or something like that.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
it
something
kind
like
of
the
really
measure
rung
of a
true.
man is how much truth he can handle, something like that. Yeah,
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 that's it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That just makes so much intuitive sense to me. This idea that even moving towards truth is painful and harsh, and I mean, even just thinking about who you would have to become to be able to see truth. I kind of thought about this in relation to that old idea of the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, because it seems
Yeah.
to me like that certainly. Okay, I'll insert my own story and then I'll throw it over to you. um,
Yeah, let's do
in
it.
my own life, it seems as though, well, when I started the podcast, I was, as we all know, younger than I am now. And so I've really shown people kind of a progression of my own maturity, I guess. You have that story of, like, yeah, I'm after truth. Yeah, let's go. And then him kind of like, whoa, slow down there. I remember sending an email to a few of the guests I'd had on the show, these big people in Stoicism today, and say, let's go, let's explore Stoicism. Come on, I'm ready to figure this out. Let's do it with me. And I remember, Greg Sadler, he has such a beautiful mannerism about him. He really suffers fools so well, and he just kind of calmly said something like yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on here and here, and like, yeah, you can find some good information over here, and like he didn't straight up tell me like, hey, listen, slow down, buddy. All right, we're already on this adventure, but we have the tendency to just go go go. But the interesting thing is, as you seek deeper and deeper into philosophy or theology, it's like the veil of your life slowly, or the curtains of your life slowly start to reveal who you really are. And that's so painful. It's so painful to see, that at all times, if you're on this adventure of philosophy, seeking wisdom, you can never remain the same. You have to always be looking at, well, what's the folly that I'm now engaging in that is perhaps not going to be serving me in the next moment. And that's like a painful ride. But the thing is, don't you feel as though it's like the lesser of two evils? It's like, like you
Yeah.
either choose the pain of allowing the scales to fall from your eyes, the curtains to peel back, the persona that you think you are, or you choose the pain of just remaining in ignorance your whole life. But nonetheless, philosophy teaches us that we are always ignorance. There is no escape. There is no escape from that
Yeah.
ignorance. Anyway, I'm going to throw it over to you. I just throw those thoughts out there and see what you think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But it's I've actually seen this very recently happen where I've moved, like you say, towards truth. Let's find out whatever the truth is. And then, you get into something so long and you get into the depths of it. And then you begin to see, or at least I begin to see, I'm still trying to figure this out myself. Maybe we can figure it out between us, but you start to see that in many ways, for you to be a happy person, or, have a meaningful life, it's almost like you have to brainwash yourself a little bit. Like, it's almost like you have to believe in things. Actually, full stop. You actually have to believe in things. And so what do I mean by that? Well, There's this thing in Stoicism called providence, right? I know you're very familiar with this, and I'm sure your
Mm.
listeners are as well. You can sum it up as everything happens for a reason, something like that, right? So you can look back on your life and you can see things, decisions that you made. You can see things that happened to you, and you can say, well, what if I would have made a different decision, man? Like my life would have been so much better. Like God, like, because I can say now I did an engineering degree. I could easily say, well, what if I did a philosophy degree? My life would be so much different. Like I should have done a philosophy degree, but that's actually the wrong approach. Now, is the question isn't like, are you right? Because you could be, you don't know. Like if you would have gone back in time and you would have made a different decision, you might be in a better place today. But the Stoic response to that is no, actually, you have to assume going forward that every decision you made in the past was the best at that particular point in time. It doesn't mean you don't learn from it, you don't grow from it, but it's this unwavering acceptance of everything that's happening to you, and forgiveness of yourself for the stupid things that you've done in the past, and accepting that, okay, well, maybe if I would have done something different, I wouldn't be where I am. Maybe I'd be better, maybe I'd be worse, but you just don't know. And to sort of tie this back with what you were saying there, that's sort of one of these places in my life now where I'm starting to see, it's like, is that true? No, I don't think that's actually true. But it's true in the way, it's true in a different sense. It's philosophically true because it seems like if you believe that to be true, things seem to get better for you. And so maybe it's true in a more profound way. I don't know. What do you think about
Mm.
that?
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I was going to ask you, how do you discern uh, re- concretely whether or not you are moving towards truth? And
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I think, when I've worked with my own mentoring clients, something that I always try to get them to do is to learn how to feel in the moment when they're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, moving in the right direction. Because, I mean, let's say that we've kind of had this reasoning capacity for a few thousand years, perhaps, maybe, if that, to kind of think really abstractly and, to conceptualize these deep philosophical ideas about what it would mean to live a good life. And, science hasn't been with us for a long time, but what has been with us for a very, 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 very long time is our intuitions and our deep feelings, our emotions. And so, of course, these feelings can mislead us, right? But it seems like what we're doing, it seems like at least what I'm trying to do in philosophy is uh, to be able to seek wisdom that will help me to, in the moment, better discern whether I am in the right place at the right time and doing the right thing. And I think that, okay, so earlier on you gave me this quote from the Dead Poets Society, and it was something like, we're only here for a brief moment of time, but isn't it beautiful that we get to contribute a verse, right? And as you said that, I got little tingly feelings inside me, right? I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, right? The same feeling that you would get when you're watching an incredible performance at the theater and somebody just pushes themselves to the ultimate, and you just think like that song, that piece of music, or that acting right there, it's just brilliant. Or the same way you feel when you go, when you're doing exactly what you feel you should be doing with your life, and you're kind of aligned with your values and your actions, right? And it's that feeling of like, hey, this is it. This is where it's supposed to be. And I think that as an artist, I tend to be more intuitive in that direction. That tends to be, where I want to be in that place where I feel that deep sensed meaning, because that seems to be the thing that reminds you of what is most important, right? And it's very easy for us, it seems to me, to kind of rationalize our way into, well, I should do this, or I should do that, or I should do this. But it seems to me like too much of that can just lead to a real kind of bitter approach to life where you're kind of just doing things because you've kind of reasoned your way into, well, I should do this. But there's I think that there's a deeper adventure to go on by being led by that internal sensed deep meaning in your life. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I know we're both musicians. I've been playing guitar since I was 9, and music's been a huge part of my life. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately in terms of stoicism, because I basically came to the conclusion that if you told me I had the choice between music and stoicism would be gone. It would not be called the Strong Stoic Podcast, right? It just wouldn't. I would never let go of music. So that's where I sort of express myself in ways that are unparalleled. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I get very neurotic when it comes to music. Like I get very, very extremely touched by music. And I would never want to rationalize my way out of that. And out of all the Stoics, I think the one who got this best was actually Seneca, because Seneca, and he gets a bit of pushback from this actually, because people say that he's not really Stoic, and he disagrees with some of the ancient Stoic principles and all this. But to me, I think he's more Stoic than, I got to be careful with what I say here. I think he is a Stoic. Let me say it like that, because he does accept and understand those passions in life, and he talks about it regularly. And Marcus Aurelius did too. He was very warm, very affectionate towards his family and his personal letters, and love and affection, all that stuff was sort of built into it. But Seneca seemed to focus a bit more on, as you would say, like beauty, beauty in things, and feeling that really what it is a religious feeling. It's this feeling that there's something greater than you. And I think that the thing about Stoicism, I think, is that it's compatible with being a musician. It's compatible with being an artist. It's compatible with so many different ways of life, but it doesn't come with its set of passions. Like Christianity comes with a church, it comes with music, it comes with a community, it comes with prayers. Stoicism comes with some quote, quote prayers, but it doesn't have this this package of here's some things that are going to allow you to be really passionate about life and feel that religious feeling. You have to sort of fill in the blanks yourself. Now that makes it really great because it's compatible with so many people, but you have to do the work. You have to do the work for it. But I absolutely agree, man. I think it's feeling that religious feeling. What I think it is a fundamental religious feeling that something is greater than you, and the harmony. I mean, I'm just thinking about music, I listen to music and I hear the harmony, and I hear how the instruments are layered on top of each other. And then I hear the singer's voice and the emotion that's in their voice. And then, there's the voices harmonizing them. And then there's the random chaos inside there. Like, to me, music is just so fundamental. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And no philosophy would make me give that up. So I agree, man. It's crucial, I think, for the vast majority of people to have something like that,
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the point that I think Jordan Peterson makes. He says, you just simply cannot reason out of, the beauty of music. You just can't. And he's like, if somebody comes up to you while you're listening to music and they're like, well, it's just a bunch of sound. And you're like, shut up, I'm listening, and that, it seems like that should be our approach in life as well. Like, if you're on a grand adventure and you've got this deep meaning pulling you forward towards something beautiful, and somebody says, well, it's all meaningless and, you're going to be gone soon. It's like, shut up, I'm living, that's like, you don't get it. And I think that, that's certainly something that I love about Seneca is he was an artist, he was a playwright. Mm-hmm. He quoted poetry all throughout his letters, and his epistles are just beautiful. It's a stunning work of art, if anything, and a great, rhetorician. Is that the word? And so, you're right. He really understood the power of beauty. And I think that when we partake in beauty, we truly are partaking in the divine. That's
Mm-hmm.
that it's the goods of our soul. It's the bread that feeds our soul, like, and we need that. Man, we need that. And I think that, sure, philosophy. So, Stoicism is a philosophy, and it's kind of been squished into that category only. That's it, but there's also deep theology within it. And I think that we now, in these modern times, we have a chance to take a look at Stoicism and say, well, what can we add to this, in order to it's not necessarily that the Stoics shy away from experiencing beauty. I think that it's just most people in our modern times who focus on Stoicism tends to be in it for that great life advice. How do I live? And then they kind of, as you say, they fill in the blanks. But I have to say, I mean, like, that's one of the things that I think religion does really well, or at least, Christianity, as far as I understand it. And, I grew up, and every week you go in and you sing hymns together, and you go out on hikes together, or, you experience beauty. Like, the church that I grew up in was the Mormons. And it's like, man, they traveled across America, found one of the most beautiful places in America, Salt Lake, amid the mountains and the grandeur, and it's just stunning place. They still build temples. They build temples better than anyone else, I think, because these temples are just pristine, beautiful, nothing impure about them. Everything is virtue to the highest degree, building these temples. And then you think about the music. Well, they have to have the best choir in the world, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's like, you listen to that choir and the orchestra and everything, you're just like, oh, like, all of these things bring us into a relationship with the divine, because they call us higher and higher. And I thought about this, Brandon, when I went into the cathedral down in Brisbane recently, and I have my problems with what they're doing there, because they've got like a children's area right in the middle of or on the side of the cathedral there. So instead of bringing your kids in now and saying like, hey, this is a place where we're reverent and we need to be quiet, and no, put them in a playpen over here. And then they've got a store in the cathedral, and you just think, okay, if Jesus were here, he'd come in and be like, moneylenders, he'd be like, he's just like, he'd be throwing things around. But when I went into this cathedral, I thought, the thing about a cathedral is every single thing in here calls you to look up, right? And to think higher, and to dig deeper into your soul. And it's just like, that's the value, I think, in religion is, let's not just refine our pursuit of beauty to within us, but let's show that architecture can be a picture of virtue. And, music is virtue, and even sports and all these sorts of things. It's like, let's participate in things that allow us to manifest beauty, virtue, divinity into the world and call us higher. And I think that, the call of Stoicism is somewhat, do that within yourself and allow that to kind of flow from you. Whereas religion is just a little bit more organized, and, let's create a space for these sorts of things. I don't know. I'll throw it back to you.
Well, let me ask you what you think about this. I've been thinking about this idea here lately, and I'm really scared about this idea, to be honest. Maybe this isn't a new thing at all, but I've been thinking about how Stoicism, so, Christianity has a lot of overlap with Stoicism, right?
Mm.
And I've been thinking about this because I came to this epiphany lately, because I realized one of the contradictions I had personally with Stoicism was the music. Because I said to myself, well, how can music not be good? Like, music's an external in Stoicism, and Stoicisms don't have inherent value. And my realization was, well, what's Stoicism about? Stoicism is about virtue. It's about cultivating a good character. So it's not that music isn't potentially good for everyone, but it's that in regards to how it affects your character, it is neutral. I came to the realization, this was a really hard truth for me to swallow. I came to the realization that the Stoics were right about this. Music is indifferent. It's neither good nor bad, given that you want to cultivate a good character. and the reason is because you can listen to a song that's going to make you virtuous, or you can listen to a song that's going to make you not virtuous. Um, that's not to say that certain externals don't have more potential upside than others, like music versus a rock. It's like, okay, maybe you can make that rock into a diamond or something like that. So, but let's just a splinter. Let's use something that's probably never good. A splinter. It's an indifferent to a stoic. Music is also an indifferent. It's an external. It's not inherently good or bad. But if you were to ask most people which has had a more positive impact on your life, I'm pretty sure everyone, 100% of people would say that music versus this splinter has a positive effect on their life. So, but this is where it gets really tricky with stoicism again, because it's not that they don't promote music per se, because to them it's indifferent, but that I think maybe what it misses, I don't know, maybe what it's missing is that certain externals have more potential to be good, to have a more effect on your life than others, and that changes individually. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certain, like, look, anybody who says that music doesn't change your soul or move you in a different direction, I mean, I remember there was a time about a year and a half ago, I think, where I ran a little experiment on myself. I had been listening to a lot of kind of neoclassical music and just really beautiful choral music, and a lot of the kind of stuff that I was listening to when I was writing The Poet and the Sage, just really music that called me to higher things, I believed. And I've always been an extremely psychopathic music listener, from like one week I'd be listening to neoclassical, and then it's jazz, and then it's like Punjabi pop, and then it's rap, and it's like I'm all over the place, right? That's just who I am. But did a little experiment, and I thought, man, I really dig some of these rap songs coming from like people like Tiger. I think it's Tiger, and stuff like that. And these are like the height of kind of capitalistic, get me that money, that lifestyle, all that sort of stuff, get me those hot women, that sort of stuff. And it's just like, it's the most anti-stoic, you might think, philosophy through this music. And I started listening to that for a week, and I go out on my walks, and I started to notice the kind of thoughts that I was having, whether it was about my relationship with my wife, whether it was about, the direction I wanted to go, whether the things that I wanted. And I was like, yeah, music leaves an imprint on your soul. It cannot not do that, right? Now, I would say that because music is so personal, people are going to gravitate towards, and especially in a time like today where we can do this, we're going to gravitate towards music that already kind of sits with us, and it's nobody's out there listening to neoclassical if they're really a metalhead, and they, it's just not what's going to happen. But I think the point that you're trying to make is that, music is an indifferent, because we can kind of curate. Well, in the same way that, Jung, he said that when you want to find out the soul of a nation, take a look at what the people are listening to, what they're reading, what are they feeding their soul? That's going to tell you which direction they're going. And I mean, it has to be an indifferent, because it can either lead you to higher things or it can lead you away. And but nonetheless, even people who would say go to some heavy punk rock or some heavy metal, like, death metal sort of concert, they're still experiencing, and a preface to that is I understand that a lot of heavy metal has like deeply Christian lyrics. The stuff is what I've heard, right? But nonetheless, they go there and they have this out of body religious experience of just being hypnotized with the crowd, and everybody's bouncing to the same rhythm, and everybody's just, it's just, so it's funny because even music that you would think it's no way that that's leading you in a good direction can like allow you to have that experience of true divine out of body momentary enlightenment. I don't know, like what
Yeah.
because I'm guessing you're a metal guy, right? No,
Rock and roll. I like rock
rock
and
and
roll. I was
roll.
never really
Okay,
into metal, but yeah, I love rock and roll.
okay.
But what that
I
made
made
me
an
think of,
assumption there because you're a strength trainer. I want you to know that I made an assumption there, right? But
it's all good.
nonetheless,
I
go on.
actually, when we're talking about music, I was listening. I'm a big Eminem fan, so when I'm working out,
He's
it's
brilliant.
all about. Oh God, he's really deep too, right? He's got. I've done a couple episodes on some of his songs because they're really really deep, But the whole like out of body experiencing, it is true. It is a really, it's an interesting thing. I don't think it necessarily means that it's good that it's out of body, right?
Yeah,
Because the Mongolians did something similar to, they would listen to music, they would beat drums before they went and slaughtered, and raped
yeah.
and pillaged, right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's not necessarily a good just because it's an out of body experience. But the one thing I did want to mention that I did want to bring up, because you mentioned Young there, and I feel like there is something to be said about getting a vice out. And this really speaks to sort of the practical, the more negative aspects of human experience, right? Like our competitive nature, which I think is actually good, but it can manifest itself in bad ways. Um, and we've designed society around this. So let me give an example here. This sort of young male aggression that a lot of males have. I really had that when I was a kid, just really aggressive and really competitive and driven and so on. And one of the ways that we give a channel for that we don't even think about anymore because we've been doing it for so long is sports. So we all agree on a set of rules and we all play this game, and it allows us to be competitive and it allows us to get out some competitive nature, and it allows us to rise up in some hierarchy that isn't killing each other, right? And I don't say that loosely because for a long time, it was like physical domination was a huge thing in our evolution. And so like we've designed ways, the point is we've designed ways in society to account for the fact that we have pieces of our nature that aren't pretty to look at. And sports is a great example of that. And so I don't know if maybe what made me think about that is sort of this, out of body experience where you're listening to this music with all these people. I don't know if that's a way for some people to sort of channel that energy into something that feels good, but is probably neutral in terms of its effect on the world. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm not a metalhead, but it's something worth thinking about.
So when you say neutral in terms of its effect on the world, are you looking at indifference as things that are neutral in their effect on the world?
Yes. Well, let me give you a great example here. So if you're a young male and you have a lot of testosterone going through your veins, man, you're ready to go and you have anger issues on top of that. And, I can preach to you about stoicism, how to deal with anger all the time, and it might be helpful for you. But I think sometimes because of the hormones, sometimes the vice is so pronounced that you have to do something with that energy. So in that particular case, if you want, like if you're having an argument with a friend of yours, and you just get this drive to punch him in the face, and you honestly feel like you can't help yourself, sure, Seneca could come to you and tell you how to back away from that, and I think that's a strategy over time. But I do think sometimes you just need to channel it. And so what you can do is you can go away and you can strength train, or you can hit a boxing bag. And I'm not saying this is the best for the long term, but I do think that sometimes some vices are really powerful, especially when you're young, especially when you're at the peak of your hormones coming in, and like you're discovering yourself, like because I've experienced this myself too, and philosophy has helped a huge amount. But I think that example is a way of sort of neutralizing a vice. So it's a way for it to sort of, you're putting the energy into this punching bag, for example, as opposed to someone's face, which is better for the world. And again, you work on it over time. You address the underlying cause, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think partly what you're saying is the way that it appears to me is that in Stoicism, there's this obviously this idea that we self-sufficient. If we're in this game of philosophy, we're trying to be truly free, meaning we can get what we need from the goods of our soul, from virtue, right? And we cultivate that internally. Whereas when we take that view, it's harder to see why you might encourage somebody to engage in a sport in order to allow virtue to be cultivated within you, but it seems to me like it kind of is a matter of saying, well, seeing as we live in a time where music is so available to us, where sports are so available to us, we can all find a sports team to join, or great music that lifts us up, because it isn't indifferent. It's not like we say, no, I'm gonna just do the internal game. We say, okay, well, seeing as it's available to me, I will partake, and I will, as Seneca might say, blend this music or this sport with virtue of my character, and allow them to dance together, you might say, and in doing so, this indifferent partakes in goodness or something like that. But there might be a time where, so I think that the beauty of the Stoic philosophy is there might be a time where you don't have all of this music available to you, right? And you don't have all of this sport available to you. And it's in those times when the value of this philosophy, I believe, comes out, because it says, well, even if you don't have all of that available to you, what can you do right now to still cultivate that beauty, that virtue, that goodness within you? And but the thing about music is like this, and this here's a movie line from you. It's from Shawshank Redemption, right? Remember where he's kind of like humming the music, and he points out that that's something that they can never take away from you, right? We always have the capacity to remember our favorite song and to cultivate that within our mind, within our soul, and to sing, and to, that's what's so beautiful about music is that you can take it with you wherever you go, because we are, as human beings, inherently musical, and listen, when I grew up in church, I can tell you there are some people who are not quote unquote musical, and they should not be singing so loud in the hymns. But there's something so beautiful about being in a congregation when you hear people who clearly are not singers, but they're singing it out, they're raising their voices, and you think, great, the music is in them. It doesn't matter if they're not great singers, but the fact is that they are allowing that good of the soul to come through them. It's something, I don't know. Yeah, it's a complicated one.
Here's a very interesting thing that I'd like your opinion on. So I read the Silmarillion last year sometime. Have you read that Tolkien's work?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so it's basically the what would you say, the backstory to the Lord of the Rings. Like it goes it goes through, like, it starts with the creation of the world, and it goes through all the history of the elves and the gods and everything. It's a very dense read, but it's an amazing book. But the key point about that is that the world was actually created through music. And so this lined up with something else that I was reading at the time. So it was really profound insight for me. But basically they had, I don't know, 4 or 5 gods, and they were all singing. So you would sing your piece and I would harmonize you, and everyone would harmonize each other. And then Sauron, or it wasn't Sauron, it was the dark spirit. I can't remember his name, but he would sing, and it was like, it was off pitch. It was, I don't know if you watch Lord of the Rings, sort of the evil music, like that, really, like, and it just kind of gives you that feeling. It was sort of like that, like just out of tune and clunky and imperfect. But it was fascinating to me that Tolkien chose to, and Tolkien was very knowledgeable about mythology, but it was very fascinating that he chose to write that the world was created literally through music, through the God singing. And then, so I want your opinion on that. But just before, I want to mention that I was reading a book by a musician of mine, one of my favorite musicians, and Sean McCann. And at the start of his biography, his autobiography, he said, "We are made of music and we are made of love." And I read those at the same time, and it was so profound because I was, I'm reading like this musician here, and I respected this guy for a very long time. I love this guy, and then I read Tolkien, and I'm like, there's got to be something to that.
Yeah,
there's something very profound and deep about that. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, there's a lot in that. There's many things that are coming to me. Firstly, Stephen Jenkinson, something that always stuck out to me when I spoke to him is he mentioned one thing at some point. He said, many cultures believe that we kind of sang our way into being. Music was the path to existence. Yeah. Then you think about Nietzsche talking about the Dionysian musicals and plays and performances, and how there was always that underlying music there, this groundswell, of music is reality, because you cannot help but feel what it has to give you, right? Like we talked about, you can't reason your way out of it. If you're at a concert and your favorite song is being played and you see the musicians, like they're playing, and it's funny that we say playing, musicians play their instruments, because it is a form of play. If it's right, it should be a playful experience, right? And so you can't help but get that deep feeling within you. It just pierces you, right? And I get the deepest sense of this kind of, is primordial, is that the right word? Primordial groundswell of being, when I'm standing in a forest, right? Because it just turn off all senses other than your ears and listen. What do you hear? It's music. You hear all these birds, they're all singing to you. Like they're all singing a song. And you hear the wind going through the trees, and you think, man, like it's just, there's a symphony being played in our lives at all moments, at all times, right? And we get to partake in that. And I can't help but feel like some of the first utterances out of human beings would have been to participate in that song that was being played at all times around them. You can even see this in certain primate species at the moment, where there's kind of like a really primal form of song being sung between them. And it's kind of this really strange, eerie song when they're kind of communicating with each other. But music doesn't communicate at all. Like a symphony doesn't have words, but it still communicates a message to you. And perhaps it's a message that you can't understand fully, rationally, but you understand it on a deeper level because you feel it and it's right there and you cannot argue with that feeling. And so, yeah, to me, and I'll tell you about this experience I had recently, Brandon. This was so funny. Like, I love recording the forest and then recording myself over the top of it, whether it's piano or because I try to participate in that music, and I try to listen and then allow myself to stop thinking about what I'm doing, but just to participate in the song of the forest and just to go on that adventure. And I had a really cool artistic experience where I started whistling with the birds, and I was like, man, the direction my whistling is going right now, it's really weird. Like I was really like the whistling that I was doing, it was freaking weird, man. It was like bird whistling. I was like, that's because I tried to allow myself just to sing the song that was there. And I mean, people can even think like, there's a rhythm within everything in life. There's a rhythm to the seasons, there's a rhythm to the day, there's a rhythm to the planets, there's a rhythm. Like, put your hand on your heart, there's a freaking rhythm inside of you, like it's
Yeah.
there. And so this idea that we sang our way into being, or that music is the kind of fundamental element of existence, I I, I can't help but feel that there's something really true about that. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean about us as human beings? What does it mean about the human experience? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I think part of it gets down to the harmony, right? Because this is one like I've there's only been a few meditations that have actually worked for me, and the one of them that works the best is I actually just put on a good set of headphones and I listen to a song, but I don't just listen to the song. I do something that's really hard for me as a musician. I try not to move. So, which is very, very, very difficult as a musician because you always want to be snapping your fingers or tapping, the beat. But I try and just not move. I don't mouth the words. I'm as still as possible, and then I try and hear everything. Because when you listen to a song, you don't really hear everything. Like you're focused
Yeah.
on different things in the song. So you're listening, when the intro starts, you're probably listening to the intro riff or something like that. And then the singer starts, and then you're focused on what they're saying. It's very rare that you're listening to everything. It's like you're looking at one thing, but then, and everything else is peripheral. It contributes to it, but you're not focused on it. So a form of meditation that I just tried one day and it works really well is I try and listen to a song and I try and hear everything. And it's so weird because it just feels like, and if you're doing this while not moving your body, it's like this out of body experience. It's very, very weird. But I think part of what makes that so powerful is the fact that it's harmonious. And I
Mm.
think that's what life is all about, right? Because
Mm.
and you're an alignment coach, and what does that mean? Well, maybe you can tell me what it means, but what I think it means is it's alignment between, it's harmony. I think it's fundamentally harmony. It's alignment between all the different parts of your life, your values, your actions, who you have around you, your contribution to the world, aligned with reality and truth as much as you can. And when you're in that state, that is a harmonious state, and music is harmonious, and that's what makes it so beautiful. So like I think fundamentally it gets down to that harmony. I think, and I also think what makes it so interesting that it touches every individual is I really think I really, really, really believe this, that every single person has a potential to live a harmonious life.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's sort of like everyone has a touch of the divine. I really believe that. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I think you're exactly right about these kind of layers and layers of virtue stacked up on each other, right? This is I think why a symphony perhaps gives us it's a more classical view of virtue, but nonetheless it's a good representation because you've got each instrument playing perfectly the part that it's there to play. And then you've got the conductor, God, fate, making the whole thing go along and directing the whole thing. And so you think it's what if your life could be like that piece of music? And I just, I know that when I'm performing with my band, and I love performing jazz, and so we'll do the classics of the American songbook. And man, you have some moments where everybody is locked in, and that's the term that we use in jazz. It's like, hey, everybody lock in, and it's like the pianist is listening to the drummer and the bassist and the singer and or the trumpeter, but they're not listening in a way that's like, okay, I've got to listen. I've got to listen. No, no, no. The pianist is listening to the bassist and the drummer and the singer, but the singer is listening to the pianist and the bassist and the drummer, and the drummer is listening to the bassist and the pianist and the singer, and the bassist is listening to everybody. Everybody is locked in because they're all right there. And so you don't have to, in jazz, if it's in the right direction, you don't have to worry about what they're doing. You just have to worry about what you're doing. You don't even have to worry. It's like if you're locked in, everybody's there on the beat at the right time. And the cool thing about jazz is you're moving in a direction where nobody knows exactly where it's going, but everybody is attentive and locked in, and so they go with it. And so it ends up being this strange flow of different rhythms and different melodies and improvised pieces. And it's just that you're so right that alignment seems to be this thing where we can bring about harmony in our lives by, you know, get your career and your family and your health and fitness and your community contribution, your spirituality, get them all working in the same direction, locked in. And if you can work towards that, you can experience perhaps a little bit of this deep sensed meaning where you feel as though, yeah, my life is heading in the right direction. And I don't know, when do you experience that most in your life?
The feeling of harmony, the feeling of meaning, I suppose.
How do you recognize it?
How I've been recognizing it lately, to be honest, is every day seems to be the same to me. And I love every day. And I know how corny that sounds, but I don't really think anymore, is it a Monday or is it a Friday? So I think there's something to be said about that. And I also have recognized lately, this is something that's happened very recent to me. I get these really big waves of gratitude lately. And I don't know what to make of that. Like, I really don't, but I do. I get these really, really big waves of gratitude. And I've never really had it to that extent, to the point where I'm texting family members really cheesy things like that level of gratitude, right? So I don't know. I think in terms of if your life is harmonious, I think part of that is accepting that parts of your life may not be particularly enjoyable, right? Like, it's not that you get everything you want, okay, to live a harmonious life. There's things that go along with that you just have to do. Like, there's going to be times you don't want to go to the gym. There's going to be times you don't want to have that difficult conversation with your partner. And so harmony is not the absence of adversity or the absence of any difficulty. It's the mode by which all of those things become irrelevant because they're deeply meaningful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's complicated. I don't know.
No. Well, I want to ask you this then, because it seems to me like somebody very wise once said to me, this was recently, they said, the kind of knowledge that we're seeking in philosophy, you kind of have to bleed for it, right? And what they meant was you have to experience some sort of pain, if only to test whether the thing that you think is real, that feeling of harmony. And I think that certainly for myself, I've recognized, particularly lately, there's lots of tension in my life between things that I'm pursuing and decisions I'm trying to make, and piling things on top of me, so starting the World Garden, studying divinity, about to do 4 classes, just that there's so many things, releasing a book, there's so many things that are coming together where it's balancing plates. And what that really taught me was that it doesn't take long for me to start to fall away from that feeling. And I need to learn whether or not the feeling that I felt, say, a year ago, when things were, I guess, a little simpler for me, whether that was the real thing whether I still, because obviously I still have a long way to go with all of my philosophical learning. But do you see what I mean? It's kind of like, what's the test? What's the
Yeah.
test of whether this is the knowledge that the stuff? Because when you say that, I mean, I remember Seneca saying in one of his letters that what we need is to come to a smooth way of life where we desire the same things and avoid the same things. That's kind of wisdom for Seneca particularly. And so it sounds like you've come to this point where every day is good. Every day presents itself to you as deeply meaningful, and you experience this gratitude. What do you think will be the test of the truth of that experience, I guess?
Well, to be honest, I don't really think it needs to be tested. I think it just goes by how you feel in that moment, you know. So like you mentioned, you know, you're sort of in this place where you're questioning. I think, you know, you're sort of questioning if maybe some of the things that you've felt in the past were real. What makes you think they wouldn't be real just because they're not maybe as prominent right now? You know, what you know, sorry, you want to go ahead?
Well, it's funny because I just did the same thing to you that I said earlier, was like, yeah, hey man, reason your way into why this thing, hey man, shut up, I'm living life. You know, like, you're exactly right, I think. And
yeah, we've circled back. That's a good point. That's interesting. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that I'm saying that experience that I had of the deep meaning wasn't real. I think what I'm trying to point out is that I've had that, and then now I'm in this new place, and I need to learn how to become more deeply grounded in this philosophy that can help me to. It's like, okay, let's say you go from a time of peace to a time of war. When you're in that time of war, perhaps you're not going to feel all of the joy and happiness and all this sort of stuff that you felt in the time of peace. But nonetheless, it's time for you to upgrade yourself into a new way of being so that you understand how you can show up in the world now and still bring with you that sense. Not that we always need to be feeling a sense of peace, because that's just, I don't think that's possible. But do you see what I mean? There's going to be times in your life when you need to grow through a new experience and bring with you the best of the past experience, but nonetheless, you're not in the same place now, and so you might not have carried all of those deep feelings of meaning that you had back then. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, man. I've actually experienced this with the guitar. But first, let me say that there's the story of the Archer, and I actually haven't read it, but I hope the summary that I've been told is accurate. But anyways, sure. Even if it's not, let's use it as a teaching moment. So there's a story of the Archer where the guy spent years and he wanted to become a master archer. And so he practiced every day, practice. And eventually he did it. He became a master archer. And at the point he became a master, he put the bow down and he never touched it again. And so the lesson was that it wasn't never about archery. It was never about archery. It was about the process of becoming an archer and having that as a way of unlocking other areas of life where you can do that, if that makes sense. So I can only speak to this really for myself personally, because, you know, when I was 9, I picked up the guitar and I didn't put it down until, I mean, I still haven't put it down, but what I mean by put it down is I stopped really challenging myself and bleeding for it. Probably, I don't know, 18 or so, around 18. So like 9 solid years. I was, as you said, and I love that, bleeding for it. And when you play guitar, you literally bleed for it because your fingers bleed. And what's interesting is that at the time I was also drumming a little bit, I was playing a bit of drums, but I hesitated to call myself a drummer. And when I look back on it, I know now why I didn't want to call myself a drummer. It's not because I didn't drum, it's because I didn't bleed for it. I didn't play until I had blisters on my hands from holding the drumsticks. I called myself a guitarist because I played until my fingers bled. And I want to circle this back because, at the start, one of the first topics we covered today was, do you think you're a philosopher? And maybe one of the ways that you can unlock that in life is to bleed for it, to suffer for it, to sacrifice for it.
I see where you're going with this, but I'm going to push back in one way.
Okay, let's do it.
You'll have to forgive me because I was listening to a commentary on the first book of Plato's Republic yesterday. Okay. And so where Socrates is just being an asshole. And but yeah, well, so but nonetheless, is there anything inherently good about suffering? It seems to me like it's suffering in the right direction, right? Like pushing in the right direction. And so if we are archers trying to hit the target, then perhaps we're suffering in the direction of virtue, of hitting the mark in philosophy. And this is what I really like about Seneca, is he points out that there is a destination to this path. You said that, if you're just wandering on a path but there's no destination, well, yeah, it's not a path. It's just wandering in the wilderness. But there is this destination. I believe that Seneca really thought that you could become wise, that you could become the sage. And so it seems like it's not the suffering that is inherently the good, it's suffering in the direction of what is good. And I think that tell me what you think of this, is we kind of have two options in life. We either suffer unnecessarily in things that are not serving us. There's always suffering. It's always going to be a part of life. We either suffer in the things that don't serve us, or we suffer towards the things that do serve us. And it seems like in philosophy, we are choosing to suffer in the direction of things that will aid the flourishing of the soul. And in turn, hopefully we arrive at a place where we can experience that deep, deep, deep felt meaning in life, because we have suffered in a direction that while we are suffering in this direction towards what is good, that in itself, the act of suffering towards what is good, transcends the unnecessary suffering of life. It pulls you above that and gives you a sense of meaning in life that, yeah, I'll leave it there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, man, I love this. So I think what it gets down to is that you need to find something that is worth suffering for. And I know your point. I'm going to address that going towards, it has to be well directed, but it doesn't, because like when you're learning to play the guitar, your fingers are sore, really sore, excruciatingly sore, because you have so many nerve endings on your fingers, and eventually you develop calluses. But when you're starting, or when you're really into it and you're playing so much, your fingers literally bleed. Now, I remember this. I remember looking at my fingers, and I remember feeling the pain as I'm playing and trying to learn a new guitar solo. And I remember not giving a shit. I remember that. And, I didn't know at the time what I was moving towards. At that point in time, it was solely driven by love of the instrument and this desire to be excellent at something, to achieve excellence, right? So it was this feeling. It's interesting though, because I think you are right. I think it has to be well directed, because when you commit yourself to something that you do not find meaningful, that is very much equivalent to hell.
Yeah.
Like I've been thinking about this the other day, and I've been very fortunate that I've always been pretty good at being authentic and being myself. I've always been really good at that. And I've been thinking about why that is. And it's not because I was naturally like this, it's because there were a few times in my life where I wasn't myself. I was trying to be cool, was trying to be popular, trying to be something that I thought I should be. And I suffered immensely for it, immensely, internally, some externally, but internally, I suffered like you wouldn't believe. It was hell. And so, there's to sort of tie this back to how the goal is important, because as opposed to staying in on a Saturday night and playing till my fingers bled, I could have been out doing drugs with friends that I knew I didn't really want to do. Both are sort of on this path, but one causes physical pain, one causes spiritual pain. And when you have spiritual harmony, the physical pain doesn't seem to be relevant.
Mm. Yeah. I think you're right there. Yeah. No, I think you're right there. And I think that this is one of the reasons why, Christians have a real advantage, it seems to me, against the inevitable sufferings of life. Because it's sort of like, if you're a real Christian, part of that idea is I'm going to surrender myself, give in to the service of the highest possible good. And, any trials, tribulation, any persecution, so much of the Christian doctrine is so interesting, that this idea that you will be persecuted over and over and over again. It's the same with the Jewish doctrine. It's like, look at what's happened to the Jewish people over history. Constant persecution, constant attempts to just wipe out their entire generations, and so but when I'm spending time around people who have, when I look at the Jewish culture, it's like, wow, what an incredible culture, what an incredible group of people. And I have Jewish people in my family. I have, Sharon is a practicing Jewish person, and so it's amazing how they have this power on their side of like, we are aligned with the highest possible good, and we just have faith that we will make it through if we have that, and we're willing to go through the suffering, because on their side is a life of deep meaning and engagement with with God, the highest possible. And so you think, yeah, that's such an interesting philosophy, right? It's this way to recognize there will always be suffering, no matter what. And often it's going to be inflicted upon you by other people. But there's a way to transcend that and to always move through that. And the Stoics give us this as well. Life is always going to be painful, and you're always going to suffer, but find that internal solitude, the solitude that Emerson spoke of, the solitude that the poet Rilke spoke of, that Seneca spoke of, that Epictetus spoke, all of these people. Internal solitude, go within yourself and live a life that is deeply meaningful within. And that there seems to be nothing better than that. Mm-hmm. But it's the difficult thing about that, and I want you to comment on this as well, is in order to actually achieve that, you cannot allow yourself to be guided by the whims of other people, or by the opinions of other people, or to do things that you really don't believe in. Because as soon as you start to do that, it's like a knife to the heart, and that's a sign that you're on the wrong direction, that you start doing things that are not in the best service of the flourishing of your soul. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. It kind of reminded me of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago. So, for those who don't know, the Soviet Union was similar, very similar to the Holocaust. Concentration camps, worked to death, no food. Like 20 to 60 million people of Russians' own citizens were killed through this system, and it was their own people. And he had this chapter called The Ascent. I think it was The Ascent, and he was talking about how you can easily look at the people that are, forcing you to work and torturing you and yelling at you and whipping you and not giving you any food. And you think of them and like you envy them, right? In a sense, not because they're terrible people, but because, you're here starving and being worked to death. And Solzhenitsyn, even in the height of his suffering, he changed his perspective on it. He said, well, if you're looking at this from a sensual perspective, they have it good. They have it better than us. But if you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, nobody has it worse than them. And this is so fundamentally Stoic, because basically what he's saying is your character is so vile that I'm willing to suffer immensely physically to not be like you. And so what's so powerful about that is that you always have control over your character. You always have control over whether or not you want to be virtuous. You don't always have control over whether or not you get to be the security guard at a Gulag Archipelago camp, at a Gulag camp. So it's a weird, I can't imagine. I've thought about this. I can't imagine the strength that he would have to have in that position to think that. It's a level of transcendence that I don't know. I'm sure we're all capable of it, but it seems to me nothing short of miraculous. And just one more example on this. Harry Potter, there's this realization in Harry Potter where he's looking at Voldemort, right? And it basically comes to the point where this is the point where Voldemort, who's the evil lord, he comes to being, and he's alive and he's well. And he has this connection with Harry Potter, and Harry Potter sees him and he sees his soul, which is like split in 7 parts, right? Like he sees his vileness. And, Harry actually says, like, I feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for you because you will never feel love. You will never feel kindness. You will never value friendship. You will never be in harmony with the world. And when you look at what something like Stoicism gives you over the time, this eudaimonia, this idea of flourishing, it is fundamentally about love and kindness and harmony with the world and friendship and all these things that really make us human. And so you get the choice every day, if which path you want to go down. But whenever I've fallen a little bit too far to not being myself, I've spiritually suffered so much that I'm just not. I don't want to do that. I'm going to just be who I am, try and be a good person, and keep going, because it's not, to me, it's not worth it. I've suffered way too much when I've done that.
Yeah. Man, I think you're right. Those are beautiful examples, especially that, just this idea of being so fortified in your character that you recognize that the true pain of life is being out of alignment in your soul, is being corrupted in your soul. And I think that that's something that you truly start to recognize as a feeling within yourself when you practice philosophy for a long time and you start to see, wow, I don't even view the same. I don't even look at the world in the same way now that I used to, 3 or 4 years ago. This is funny because listening to this commentary on Plato and Socrates talking about the kind of ladder of love, first that there's that physical attraction, and then that moves to an attraction to the soul of the person, and then to wisdom, and moving kind of up and up and up this ladder of love. And there certainly does come a point where you start to see that the true beauty, and this is not some sort of like, oh, beauty is on the inside kind of, I know it's cliche, but it's like, yeah, it's serious. Like, beauty is on the inside, and that shines through in people. You see that in people when they are so when they just act beautifully in life towards you and other people. You just, you notice the way that you feel about certain people and the way that they act, and you think, yeah, there's nothing better than a good character. There's just nothing better. And there's nothing that we desire more in other people than for them to not be fake, to not be Sunday Christians, as they used to call them. You know, I'll put on my good face on Sunday, and then the rest of the week I'm this. But, you know, we want people who are genuine, who know what they're all about, who what you said. I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I have to get going because I've got another interview in about 5 minutes. But what I really want to do is, Brandon, do you want to share anything about what you're doing with Kai coming up?
Yes. So next Saturday, where are we here? Wednesday. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday, doing a live Q&A with Kai Whiting, who I'm sure your audience knows, but authored Being Better, Stoicism for a World Worth Living In. So if you reach out to me on my channel, DM me, basically, you know, the requirements are that you have a copy of the book, and then you'll be invited to this private Q&A. You get to ask as many questions as you want to Kai about Stoicism. You know, so I wanted to extend it to Simon's community as well. My community has already been informed of it, but if you're interested, please check me out there and get in touch with me. I know you got to get going. I do want to say, Simon, thank you so much for the conversation, man. I had so much fun. You know, talk about meaning and talking about feeling like you're in harmony. I really felt that with this conversation, and that's sincere. I really mean that. So thank you so much,
man. We're going to keep on allowing this friendship to flourish, because I feel the same way. It's just such a beautiful conversation. I think this is the direction I want the podcast to go, you know, away from the kind of general, you know, interviewing just because somebody's got a book out or this, that, you know, it's like, no, let's have conversations with people we love about things that we love.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. So yeah, man, keep on doing what you're doing, and there will be many, many more conversations.
All right, brother. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to the Walled Garden Podcast. If you'd like to attend any of our free meetups and events, or if you'd like to get one-on-one mentoring with either Sharon LaBelle, Kai Whiting, or myself, just go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, don't forget to nourish those gardens in your mind.